Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 17 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series, the Cincinnati Bengals. Make sure to like and comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the future videos, or you can watch all the past ones. That's fun too. And this might be my most controversial take to date. You know, I've gotten a lot of crap in some other videos for the rankings. This one might take the cake, though, and trust me, I was as surprised as you guys were. But the formula doesn't lie. The formula takes out the bias. It takes out the bias. And they are 17th, and granted, it is very close. It is very close. I think it's not, there's like a 1.1 overall difference between like my 17th ranked team and like my 14th ranked team or something. It's very close. Now, I'm sure you're saying, you're like, the Bengals would, it's still 14. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this football team. They do have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL who can't stay healthy. They do have one of the best right tackles in the NFL that they just signed in Trent Brown, who can't stay healthy. They just lost Joe Mixon, and they replaced him with Zach Moss. Not a lot of high upside there for the run game coming in. They've sort of revamped the offensive line a little bit. They do have some issues with T. Higgins, who more likely than not is in his last season. Mike Gesicki's your tight end / slot receiver. Got to find a role for him in the offense. They can be truly effective. And you've lost your offensive coordinator, though your quarterback's coach got promoted. We'll talk about him, and I do kind of like that one because he's been Joe Burrow's quarterback coach from the beginning. Your defense, you saw some regression in some of your better players last year. You're hoping they can get back to where they were. You do hold one of the best edge rushers in the entire league in Trey Hendrickson. You did sign a tremendous safety in pass coverage at least in Geno Stone. So there are some things to be excited about. It just seems to be a lot of unrealized potential. Like some of it in terms of like name value looks good, but when it's been put to practice, it hasn't really turned out all that great. It'll be interesting to see what this team looks like with a full healthy season ahead of them. You hope that it's a full healthy season ahead of them, especially for the ones that hold the most injury concerns. They are unfortunately the best players on the team, sans Jamar Chase, talking about Joe Burrow and Trent Brown. But it all starts with how this coaching staff can behave, with how this coaching staff can put together things week to week, and how they can hide some of these deficiencies that we're going to see throughout the player evaluations, and if they can help raise the ship up and get this team back to being like that solid playoff team that they sort of projected to be the last couple of seasons. So this is my 18th ranked coaching staff, and there's really no coach that's been more hot and cold for me, and I think for a lot of people, than Zach Taylor. He had that initial run with the Bengals that people were questioning him, and I think rightfully so. And then they had the run to the Super Bowl, and it was like, okay, he had hit his stride. And then I don't know, there's just something about him, you know, through the first 5 seasons where you're just, he's not, I guess maybe because he's not exciting, you know, like he's not like boisterous like a Jim Harbaugh, or you know, he doesn't run a particularly innovative and like over-the-top creative offense the way that like a Kyle Shanahan does. I don't know. He is my 18th ranked head coach. It's sort of the same thing I talked about with Kevin O'Connell last time. I don't have a problem with people put him in the top 15. It's just weighing some of the other coaches that are ahead of him. I felt like this is where he needed to be ranked. I look at Dan Pitcher, who's taking over for Brian Callahan, who took the head coaching job over in Tennessee. It is his 9th year with the staff. You know, he was the quarterback's coach for the last like 3 or 4 seasons or something. So he's really been Joe Burrow's quarterback coach his entire time. That's why I give him a little bit of a higher grade than you'll see from most first-year coordinators. Is especially on the offensive side, is because he's been the guy that's really formed Joe Burrow's abilities. And Joe Burrow came in as a really nice canvas to work with, and I think he's done a good job. Now when he gets into more responsibilities, at the end of the day, it's still Zach Taylor's offense, which is why it's hard to really judge Brian Callahan as well. But we'll see what pitcher looks like when Callahan is not there, and now he's really the guy in total control. They did lose Bill Callahan, who was coaching with his son Brian quite often. They don't really have any other position coaches that really jump off the page here. You look at the offensive line coach, which is Frank Pollock. He also has an assistant there. It's a Derek Frazier. See how those guys work out in this staff. But there's really nobody that's jumping off the page here from the positional coach standpoint. So we'll see how Dan Pitcher really coordinates all those guys together. And then we got Lou Anarumo, who's my 14th ranked defensive coordinator. And kind of like what we see on the offense, if someone put him at like 11th or 10th, I don't think I'd be all that critical of them either. He's gotten some head coaching buzz the last couple seasons. I do kind of expect this, unless the Bengals defense completely stinks, that this may be his last year in the league where he's not a head coach. He's really turned Trey Hendrickson into like this superstar defensive end that's really happened under him. He did have Jesse Bates for a while there. They couldn't really make that work. But how he develops Dax Hill moving forward, he's done a good job with Jordan Battle just last year. Linebackers are solid. They had a down year last year. We'll see how they can recover performance-wise. James Betcher is the linebackers coach, so see how he works with them there. But again, kind of the defensive staff, nobody's really jumping off the page there either. Could be just my personal ignorance to the staff, perhaps. But I know James Betcher is I like him as a linebackers coach. I think, in his tenure with the Bengals, he's done a pretty good job the last 3 seasons as the linebacker coach, working with Logan Wilson. Got Jermaine Pratt to play well 2 years ago. Again, kind of a down year. But I think overall that's a good staff member for Anarumo to have. But he's basically auditioning for the most ideal head coaching job next year out of really anyone, I would say, that we might have covered now as a positional coach so far, because he's the one that's gotten the most buzz. Brian Flores might be out there as well, but I think Lou Anarumo gets it before Flores does. But I think that the offensive staff is the one that always seems to have question marks here. Even though they have developed a really good offense. So how Zach Taylor can rebound this upcoming season, and if he can rebound this team, if he can get them back to looking like a true contender, then I think we'll see some improvements here on the staff ranking this time next season. Here's the true megastar of the team. It's Joe Burrow, the quarterback. He's my number 3 ranked quarterback in this entire series. They do have the best backup in the league right now, Jake Browning. He got a 76. He played amazing last season in replacement of Joe Burrow. He kept their season alive. Ran the system really well, was very efficient with the ball. He basically played like a poor man's Joe Burrow last season. So to get Joe Burrow back, you get him back healthy, with his new Cody Rhodes hairstyle. Maybe he finishes the story like Cody and goes to the Super Bowl and wins it this time instead of losing in Los Angeles. There's a lot of correlations there for you wrestling fans out there. Joe Burrow lost in Los Angeles, and now he gets the chance to go back perhaps to the Super Bowl with the Cody Rhodes blonde and finish his story. Burrow's just made the best of all of his tangibles and intangibles since he got into the league. His arm strength, obviously people have called into question, but he's so efficiently accurate. And, I wouldn't even classify his arm strength as being terrible. Like, there's so many nuances to his game that make up for the things that he doesn't necessarily have that a guy like, say, Patrick Mahomes has. And he could be in a position to have an MVP caliber season, especially because it's looking more like that comeback year, like being off, like the Bengals sort of being an off team last year, him being injured. It sort of put him almost like an out of sight, out of mind thing with, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jordan Love getting a lot of attention now, Jared Goff getting a lot more attention, people talking about Brock Purdy all the time. And it's really easy to let Joe Burrow sort of get lost in there despite how high end his talent is. And he's really the driving force of this offense. And now, especially when they don't have much of a running game coming their way, most likely, he's going to, I think, be even more responsible for the offense's success. So he goes from having one of the better running backs in the league in Joe Mixon to now he's gone to Houston and they have the 30th ranked running back room in the league with free agent Zach Moss and second-year player Chase Brown, who are looking like they're going to be the two guys splitting carries for this upcoming season. Now, I look at Zach Moss as more of your early downs back, and Chase Brown, he could be like a little spell back there. I think he's, a decent, middle of the pack backup caliber. You prefer Zach Moss, maybe be a high-end number 2 rather than your number 1. But I think it gives Chase Brown a chance to develop a little bit more, and he's going to get his opportunities in the receiving game. They are tied for 27th, and I think this is where he's going to get a bulk of his work and start to develop his game a lot more, because I wouldn't necessarily graded him that much higher than Zach Moss. But I do think because Zach Moss will do a lot more of the brunt work, and I do think Chase Brown, because it's only his second year in the league, he's going to have a chance to develop into more of an all-around full-time starter caliber back. Zach Moss has been in the league long enough. You kind of know who he is. This is kind of what Zach Moss is going to be. He's sort of like this bridge running back that they brought in while hoping that someone like Chase Brown develops in the background. They do have, Chris Evans from Michigan, who they drafted, I believe, a couple years ago. Noah Cain, Elijah Collins are rookies coming in this year. Travion Williams has sort of been a under-the-cover mainstay there in this backfield. Always seems to find his way onto the roster. So there is going to be opportunities here to develop. I think bringing in Zach Moss was sort of just, you wanted a competent starter who could sort of do everything. So then that way, if you don't get the development that you want out of Chase Brown or out of Chris Evans, you're kind of hoping that somebody develops behind Zach Moss. But if they don't, you have competence in both aspects of the game. Again, if Zach Moss was the starting receiving back, they'd only be like 28th, 29th, which is still not great. It's still not high end, but you can manufacture greatness out of a backfield, by committee when you have the caliber of passing game that you are bringing in with the quarterback and the receivers. You can really hide a not so great running attack. The way that we've seen so many other great teams do. You could set up a system where teams are so focused on the pass that you get a guy like Zach Moss who's just sort of sure-handed, who could get you 4.5 yards a carry, and then you got a really efficient running game to complement the passing game that really carries your entire offense. Or, you get Chase Brown who can, be a little more dynamic in the passing game, perhaps develop a little bit as an early down back. And then you could have something that by the end of the year, you're looking at more like maybe a top 20 backfield rather than, a bottom three to bottom 5 in the entire league. But this is where the stars really live on this team. It is in the wide receiver room, and they are tied for 7th. You have Jamar Chase, who's like a true high-end number 1 receiver, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. T. Higgins, who is like this high-end number 2, probably one of the best, if not the best, number 2 wide receiver in the entire league. He's up there certainly with guys like Keenan Allen and all that. in his last year with the Bengals. This is definitely his last year, so I'm expecting him playing on the franchise tag to really want to show out this year. So I would expect big things from him. And then they got Jermaine Burton, who I was very surprised that they picked up, just because he had so many off the field issues that hurt his draft stock. Like, he's got first round talent. My concern is, and the pitcher kind of says it all with the gun thing. What's the character issues here? Now, I know maybe it's a little unfair to get, for that, but it is what it is. Especially because last year they drafted a couple wide receivers. They did let Tyler Boyd go. He ended up in Tennessee. But I think Jermaine Burton, as a number 3 receiver, as long as he keeps his nose clean here, really is going to be a truly effective wide receiver 3 on this team to complement Jamar Chase and T. Higgins really well. I mean, going back to Jamar Chase, tremendous route runner, extremely good hands, great straight line speed, great speed out of his cuts. He's as much of a number 1 receiver in the NFL as you're going to find. And him and Joe Burrow, the chemistry that they were able to bring over from LSU, it can't be understated. And he's somebody who's constantly in a position to have that 1,500-yard, 15-touchdown season. Even with some of the backups they have here, Charlie Jones and Trenton Irwin are going to be competing for snaps here. Jermaine Burton's spot is not necessarily all that guaranteed. And I think it was a low risk pick to get Jermaine Burton because you had Jones and Irwin here. You also had Andre Iosivas, who you drafted last year as well, sort of living underneath here. And the hope is that you can find 4 solid wide receivers out of the 6 that you have here. You got the top 2, and then you got Burton, Jones, Irwin, and Iosivas that you are looking who's going to be wide receiver 3 and 4 out of that group. And if Jermaine Burton acts up, it's a really easy transition to make to somebody who on pure talent level are a little bit less, but could be higher end contributors and better for just the overall morale of the locker room. So the pressure really is on Jermaine Burton to put those character concerns to rest. And as we get to the tight end room, Mike Gesicki right now, I love Mike Gesicki, but I can't rank him as anything other than the last tight end in the league. Now, there's talks of him getting a lot of work as the slot wide receiver, and then maybe, Tanner Hudson plays tight end. But I like Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin, the 2 rookies that they have there. I hope I could see them getting some playing time there. I know Drew Sample sort of hovered in there, has looked really good in some games, has not looked great in others. But I do like Tanner Hudson and Gesicki to sort of be a slot in maybe some bigger sets. Tanner Hudson for the blocking capabilities. I just don't, at one point, that one year in Miami, second to last year in Miami, he looked like he was a top 5 tight end in the league. Disappeared his last year in Miami and hasn't really ever recovered and hasn't really gone back to that. Even in New England, it wasn't all that great, and you can blame that on the quality of the offense or whatever. There's just, to me, it's just, can Gesicki get back to what it looked like he was for that one season in particular in Miami, his second to last year in Miami? I wouldn't hold my breath on it, though, and it's difficult to rank him as that, so that's why I just can't do it. But overall, he does kind of drag down this weaponry group as it stands right now, because even as a slot receiver, he's not really a true slot receiver. I mean, he'd be considered a bigger slot, sort of like what Tyler Boyd was, but, it's just Tyler Boyd's still a traditional wide receiver. So I don't know how exactly they work him in. I think it's a low, again, sort of like what we saw with Zach Moss. It's a low risk signing to get Mike Gesicki as well. Because, I mean, worst case scenario, you knew what you were getting. You just needed a guy to sort of fill a role, play a role in the offense and, make a play here every now and then. Best case scenario, you're like, oh, we got a top 5 tight end in the NFL. That range is a really wide one when it comes to Zach Moss and for Mike Gesicki as well, just because of how they can structure the offense and because of what we've seen from Gesicki in the past. Now we're going to the offensive line, and this is where all the question marks exist and what really drags down this team, because personally, I don't have a lot of faith in this offensive line for many reasons. We'll start with the two tackles, the two brand new tackles, Orlando Brown, Trent Brown. Okay, Orlando Brown, whatever. I don't think that he's ever really been as good as he was with the Baltimore Ravens playing right tackle, but he's a left tackle apparently now in the NFL, and he hasn't really been as good. He's still, I think he's still a starting quality tackle for sure. You got Trent Brown, who I think could be a real high-end tackle, but it's impossible for him to stay healthy. Ted Karras, one of the better centers in the entire league. I really like him. The guards. Cordell Volson, Alex Kappa. Alex Kappa came in as a free agency signing. There was a lot of expectations for him. Hasn't really panned out. We'll see if he can bounce back with a full healthy season here. Cordell Volson, sort of the same deal. It's like there's constant competition going on. I think they did solve the two tackle spots here with Trent Brown and Orlando Brown. Now I think they're sort of just got to work out the two guard positions here, and I think there'll be more of a competition than maybe people are expecting. As for Trent Brown, they did draft Marius Mims, who I think will eventually play probably 5 or 6 games at least this year with Trent Brown made out of absolute glass. And then the other rookie, Matt Lee, I think is a sneaky backup center at this point, who, if he can kick over to guard, I think he can maybe compete for a starting guard spot at some point throughout the year if the two guards they have right now really start to struggle. Dante Smith is sort of your swing tackle as well. I think you got Mims and Smith who are your tackles there. You look at some of these other guys, there's going to be some open competition here for these other spots. You are dealing with just the 24th ranked pass blocking offensive line here. So it's not like they should be closed off to any type of competition here, especially because this team in general is going to be so driven by the passing offense just based on how they've structured the rest of the offensive depth chart. And as you move on to the run blocking, they are actually 13th, and this really helps with the fact that they don't have that high-end running back. This is going to open opportunities now because teams are going to be so focused on them passing. They're going to have this ability to block in the run game that's going to help raise up maybe the lack of upside the running back room has right now. Granted, a lot of this relies on Trent Brown staying healthy and him being one of the best, if not the best, run blocking offense right tackle in the league. He's up there. He's up there with the best in the entire game. But there is the expectation that he gets hurt, and if he gets hurt, they got no one to come in and replace him because Marius Mims is not a great run blocker at all. Neither is Dante Smith, so they will lose a lot of their ability in that. Trent Brown is such a massive human being, and he moves guys so well, but he's also got this athleticism to him that really makes him a threat in the run game that does raise the entire group up. Now, Orlando Brown, serviceable. Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa both much better in run blocking as well. That helps. Ted Karras, still a solid center in run blocking. Pass blocking is really his thing. But this is an interesting part of the group. Now, if Trent Brown just stays healthy, it's a great O-line. The second you got to start putting Marius Mims in these situations at this point in his career, if you don't make magic happen in those early training camp OTAs with his run blocking, then it could be a long season, at least in certain aspects when he's got to come in to replace Trent Brown. Again, Matt Lee, I can't help but point out, in terms of depth, he's the best depth run blocker that they got. Those interior run blocking grades are great. I could see him easily competing for one of the guard spots. You wouldn't lose a whole lot, if anything at all, in terms of the run block quality, and you'd gain a lot in pass blocking quality, especially if he's standing next to somebody like an Orlando Brown and in between Orlando Brown and Ted Karras, or Ted Karras and Trent Brown, who are these great veterans who can really help him out, and they'll hide a lot of his deficiencies. So you're hoping that comes from Volson and Kappa, but the possibility is there, and I would look out for that if he can, keep it together and make this football team. He could be a real threat to that. How the rest of the depth works out after Smith, Lee, and Mims, again, I think flexibility is going to be a big thing, so look for Jackson Carman and Jackson Kirkland to maybe have the edge on a couple of people. Cody Ford's got the league experience, so that could be a real asset for them. So I would look for those guys to make an impact and perhaps be the guys that make the team and round out the offensive line depth if they keep 4 or 5 depth offensive linemen. But an overall sort of just middle of the pack, high end of the second half of the league type of a thing, between 16 and 20 overall, I would say. But there is some upside here if, Orlando Brown can, get back to the level that he was in Baltimore. If Trent Brown can stay healthy, you get some development from these guards, you could be looking at, a top 15 offensive line by the end of the season. So if we run through the wide receiver tight end blocking, they get a B grade there, but it's a D in the depth. So there could be some fluctuations in those terms. But really, the glaring needs there, the depth is really not that bad. They got some pretty good depth there. Nothing drops into the 50s for depth. So they have a higher floor, I'd say, than most teams would have. There's just some upside issues in certain position groups, so we'll see how this all sort of works out, and if the coaching staff puts together a plan that can hide these deficiencies, because they are easier deficiencies to hide than you would see with most other teams. They got great wide receiver play, they got great quarterback play, competent running ability. You could find yourself with a really effective offense in the end of things. But overall, in talent level, they're the 24th ranked total offense, 22nd pass offense, 25th run offense. Now, this is really dragged down by it being, in the pass offense at least, a very, very top heavy. It's really quarterback and the 2 receivers, and then it's kind of what else do you have? Will the offensive line continue to be a detriment to Joe Burrow's health and his career? Those are I think valid question marks that drag them down that some other teams just don't have. So it kind of hurts the floor when your quarterback's at risk this way. And there's a lot of safety blankets that just don't exist in this offense from the running back room in the receiving game and the tight ends. In the running game, it's really just a lack of upside. I think that's just the easiest way to put it. And that lack of upside, I think, does hurt. I think the floor is high. The floor is higher than most, but the ceiling is not that much higher than the floor, it seems, with the run offense. Moving on here to the defense, and this is an exciting edge room. They are ranked 11th here for the edge rush. Trey Hendrickson, true number 1 edge player, has done great. We touched upon it a little bit earlier. He has been amazing since coming to Cincinnati, and has really established himself as a top 10 at worst edge rusher, a true 3-down attacker. And they got a nice little rotation here of number 2 guys, a nice healthy rotation. Sam Hubbard has sort of lived his career as that quintessential number 2 edge player. They drafted Myles Murphy last year. They're really hoping to get more out of him this year than last year. They drafted him to have sort of the slow build, sort of the same way they did with Armarius Mims this year. So it was a really effective draft strategy, I think, and I do expect more from Myles Murphy this year. I think he'll get more opportunities. Cam Sample is sort of like a bigger defensive end. He's more like an early down defensive end in terms of his size. You'll probably see him more likely to kick inside in passing situations, but he is on the depth chart as a defensive end. If I look at him and Zach Carter, for example, as almost the same type of a player. So it was a wonder why they both got drafted in 2 consecutive years, but it is what it is. Joseph Osai, was that 3-4 outside linebacker in Texas. So he's still sort of getting accustomed to being a 4-3 defensive end in the NFL. It is a bit of a learning curve there. But still some really good upside here. They're going to have a really good rotation there at the number 2 edge spot. When they get to it against the run, they are tied for 21st. They just don't have a whole lot in terms of a number 2 in that aspect. That's where this rotation is going to get very interesting. Because do they go with a bigger body like a Cam Sample? Do they kick out somebody who plays interior defensive line to play an early down defensive end, like an undersized interior, oversized end type of a player? They have that existing in there as well. But Trey Hendrickson, can't be understated. Still a great player in every aspect of the game. He's somebody that you want on the field as much as you possibly can. You hope Myles Murphy can develop that aspect of his game as well, because I think really, because they did spend a first-round pick on him, the goal is, I would say, going into maybe next season, not necessarily this one, but next season, is that you have a surefire 1-2 punch, 2-3 down defensive ends in Trey Hendrickson and Myles Murphy. I think that's the ideal situation that they want to be in. Still not a bad edge room to have. Tied for 21st is not something that, you should, the sky's falling type of a deal. They have an interior group that is, tied for 25th. They're going to have a 3-man rotation, I would say, throughout. Sheldon Rankins is going to be here. BJ Hill, and then Chris Jenkins, who they drafted in the second round this past year. Was it the second round or the third round? I can't, damn it. I apologize. I can't recall, but Chris Jenkins is a great player. You're just not going to see him in passing situations. At least not early in his career. Sheldon Rankins brought in to be that guy. BJ Hill has been like up and down in a lot of these aspects of his game. He will probably end up being out of the 3 interior defensive linemen, the one that gets the most snaps. Because when you get to the run stuffing, he's actually quite good at that. And, Chris Jenkins, that's where he's really going to shine. I think you'll see a lot of him on early downs. And this is where you're going to get Sheldon Rankins off the field in these situations. He's still a good player, decent player to have for the interior. But Chris Jenkins and BJ Hill, I would say, are your early down interior guys. And then Jenkins will come out. Sheldon Rankins will come in to get after the passer in those situations. I would also look at another rookie, McKinley Jackson, to get some play time. You'll see, as a run stuffer, he could be a candidate to go and play defensive end on early downs, on like those true like first down situations, true running situations. I would be surprised if you saw him play a little bit of defensive end as well. You get Zach Carter, who is in a weird spot, especially because Cam Samples sort of more of established his role on this roster. I wouldn't expect Zach Carter to maybe make it that far. If anything, I think you got 4 guys there at the top of the depth chart: Rankins, Hill, Jenkins, and Jackson, who are the ones guaranteed roster spots. And then after that, it really depends on how many interior defensive linemen they plan on carrying, especially when you do have Cam Sample, who you're going to be keeping as at least a defensive end. How are they going to position these people throughout camp, and what their roles are going to be? Outside of those 4, I don't really see anything locked in. I do like the depth for early downs. I do think that it puts them in a nice safe spot. This is a safe spot for your interior defensive line to not just completely be a detriment to your entire defensive grading. I do want to see more of the interior rush. I do want to see, BJ Hill, get some more development, get back to where he was. I know he's a veteran of this game, and development's kind of maybe out of his reach. He kind of maybe is who he is. But you're hoping he can take a step forward, especially with a guy like Sheldon Rankins next to him, who in these situations is going to be quite good. So hopefully BJ Hill, as being easily the 4th person that people are going to be, offensive coordinators are going to be concentrating on in that front 4 rush, that maybe he can take advantage of some of those opportunities, those one-on-ones with a guard that he's sure to face throughout the entire season. And hopefully that can raise the overall interior rush grade. Moving on to their linebackers, and I think this group took a huge step back last year. There was just so much missing from this group that wasn't missing 2 years ago. They did drop to tied for 27th for me in linebacker coverage. And they dropped to 30th for me in linebackers versus the run. It was just not they just did not perform well last year as a group, as individuals. How they work this out. I think Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, and Joe Bacci seem to be the three guys right now. Davis Gaither hasn't really developed a whole lot like they've been hoping. There's just not a whole lot happening here for this linebacker room. Logan Wilson at one with that Super Bowl run was looking like one of the best linebackers in football, and it's sort of been a steady decline since then. Admittedly, he has been effective in forcing turnovers. I think that can't be understated. I can kind of see the comments right now, but he leads linebackers in interceptions in the last 4 seasons or something. He's got 11 interceptions, and the next guy has 8. But that doesn't always tell the whole story. I think I look at Logan Wilson at linebacker the same way you gotta kind of look at how Trayvon Diggs was for a while there, where he was forcing turnovers, but he was also if he wasn't forcing a turnover, it was because he was getting beat to death on the outside by whoever he was supposed to be covering. And I think Logan Wilson, especially last year, and I'd say into the year before that, really kind of fell into that category where he was like a true boom or bust player in the passing game, and you're hoping he can get to more of that, raise the floor up and not be so much of a liability as much as he has been sometimes, and be more of that true weapon at linebacker, that 3-down linebacker, dropping back into a zone, maybe getting into some man coverage, the way that we've seen him effectively do it, and just be much more consistent than he has been in recent times. Jermaine Pratt, I don't get why, people were like, oh, he's going to get paid big money. I said he wasn't. He pretty much got paid the contract that I predicted 2 years in my thing 2 years ago, my offseason predictions video. So shout out to me for that. And I just kind of felt like, contract year, he'll probably blow up, and then he'll go back to what he really was every year before that. And that's basically what happened. He's still going to find his way onto the field in these situations there, but I think Joe Bacci's going to get most of the snaps. And then you'll see, I think, Aaron Casey. You'll probably see Devin Harper if they make the team, maybe kicking in on some of these early down situations. More often than you'll see Jermaine Pratt, who's just, against the run is just not my cup of tea. We'll say that. Moving on to the cornerbacks, and they are tied for 23rd. It's a very, very interesting group. They have Mike Hilton, who's going to be who's their best corner, who's going to be playing that slot role. DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt are going to be your outside corners there. You're hoping that Cam Taylor-Britt can take a step forward, that DJ Turner can continue to develop going into his second season. You got to keep in mind, Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner are really young players who are going to get a lot of opportunities, and there's going to be a lot of expectation on them playing against some of the quality they're going to be seeing. Mike Hilton, though, is sort of the glue that holds this group together. You get into some of the depth they've not for nothing, they've been really good at setting themselves up with some good depth. Josh Newton is someone they picked up. Dion Anthony, Lance Robinson, some rookies they've added here. DJ Ivey was a rookie last season, I believe. And so they got a nice little floor that they developed here with Newton, Ivey, and Anthony to really help out here. And, there's talks of them moving Dax Hill to more of a cornerback role as well. I think he would be more of in a slot role, so that would be likely him being, at best, a backup to Mike Hilton, while Josh Newton's going to be also competing for that job as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they figure out how they're going to use Dax Hill, because when you get to the safety coverage, he is the number 3 safety in sort of all these situations. Jordan Battle was a tremendous rookie last season. He played such great ball in both aspects of the game, run and pass. Really shined through, really quieted a lot of critics who had him quite high in the draft rankings, and then sort of as the Alabama season went on, really dropped him completely out of them to the point where it hurt his draft stock. But then they picked him up, and he got into the starting lineup rather quickly and played tremendous. he's one half of a tied for third safety group in terms of pass coverage, because they also brought in Geno Stone from Baltimore, who, not for nothing, in pass coverage, he might have been a top 5 safety in the league last year. Against the run, he is almost worse than dirt, but as that deep third safety, ball hawking everywhere, sideline to sideline, he was absolutely fantastic, and I expect that to be the role that he has on this team. You get into more early downs run support, Von Bell will find his way onto the field in those scenarios. Geno Stone just not good. He's probably the worst safety on the roster in terms of that ability. Dax Hill sort of sits there again as your number 3 guy. I think he'll find a healthy way into the rotation, I believe, because he can play in the slot. He can maybe play like an 8th man in the box in some scenarios. But Jordan Battle, I think, is your safety who gets the most snaps out of everyone. Geno Stone will come in if you're probably running like those 3 safety sets. I could see them doing that. Having Geno Stone be like that top third safety, and then Dax Hill and Jordan Battle sort of play closer to the line. Sort of like what you saw with the Baltimore Ravens last year. But overall, this safety group is great, especially considering last year they lost the best safety in the league in Jesse Bates. They were able to bounce back with some really good drafting, some really good development, and now some really good free agency signings like Geno Stone. This group is going to make up, I think, for a lot of deficiencies you're going to see from these cornerbacks, especially with the youth there. Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner, Josh Newton, DJ Ivey. There's a lot of young players that are going to need to develop at one of the hardest positions in the NFL to play as a rookie, which is cornerback. To have have this quality waiting behind them, the depth, the quality, even PJ Jules and Michael Dowell. I kind of like them as well. I don't know if they make the team just because there's so many other good talents in there that are like well-rounded and more experienced. But I could see PJ Jules sitting in like the practice squad and then coming up and being pretty serviceable in certain roles here. Same thing with Michael Dowell. But overall, it's sort of like, how much can the talent level on the back end help the upside that you have, the unrealized upside that they have at the cornerback position. I think that's the story of what this pass defense is going to be, because we know they're going to get a good pass rush in there. It's just a matter of what these defensive backs are going to be able to produce to complement that group. I think there's a lot of upside here, though. A lot. So you look at the cornerbacks, they get a C grade for run blocking, nothing special. The pass defense is looking good. If we can get Logan Wilson back to playing a more consistent level of ball, it could be easily a top 5 pass defense. Because it's a lot of these guys are operating really at their floors, I would think. I can't really see Cam Taylor-Britt or DJ Turner regressing. So it's just a really good group. The depth is there in some of these key positional groups like edge, like safety, and cornerback to a degree, though it's a lot of youth. I do sort of cringe a bit at some of the run defense. So that could be an issue. You hope that the offense is potent enough as a passing offense that they're going to be able to get some leads for you, though, and you won't be seeing a whole lot of running. Because overall, this is my 22nd ranked defense, 19th pass defense. Again, you get those linebackers up, the cornerbacks develop more. You could be looking at top 15, top 10 pass defense. And then the rush defense is 29th. Just not a lot of high-end talent in terms of their ability to play against the run. Their best asset really against the run is the safety group. So how effective and how much of a game changer could the safety group truly be in run defense? Overall 22nd ranked defense. So we take a look at their overall grade. They are ranked 17th, the 17th overall team, the 18th ranked coaching staff, 24th offense, 22nd defense. And you can say, wow, they have the 24th and 22nd, but they're ranked 17th. That just goes to show you how close some of these grades are and the little bit of a difference and that little bit of a boost that having, a top 20 coaching staff can have on sort of taking a couple teams over the top on others. I do think they'll be better coached than some of the teams that are below them. And so we'll see how all that pans out throughout the season. They do have a really tough schedule. And there it is. My full deep dive on my number 17 ranked team, the Cincinnati Bengals. It's going to be a hard road for this team. Tough schedule and a tough division. They got to stay healthy, man. There is so much upside here, but the health is such a concern. We'll see how this all works out. If you want to catch any more of the videos in this series, you'll see it on either side of this beautiful head. And I will see you guys with the next video next time. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.